Welcome to GausRoth Tutorials. I'm GausRoth, and today we're going to look at a player health system. Let's go into build mode to show you what I have. Both these triggers are set to trigger on player. This projectile is set to all players, and this cube is set to collision events from players with the head, torso, and hands toggled on. This cube is just holding our health manager script, and in our health manager script we have just when world is started. We'll have to create a couple of variables. We'll need a object variable for our green trigger, need an object variable for our red trigger, need an object variable for our projectile launcher, and we'll need an object variable for our cube. We will also need a number variable for our starting health. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to all of these events on this script. So when world is started, we need to connect. So go to events, scroll all the way down to connect to event, and we're going to drag in our green trigger, and that's going to be a trigger event. You can use the lowercase t. I prefer using the uppercase t. There is really no difference that I can tell. We need to do the same for our red trigger, and then we need to connect to our launcher and our cube. However, the events aren't in here yet, so what we need to do for our launcher is go to events and find our launcher events or projectile events, and when projectile hits player, so the moment I drop this in and I go to launcher, now projectile hits player is in there. So now I can connect it to the local event, projectile hits player, and we need to grab a collision event, so when colliding with player, and we'll set our cube's collision event to the collision enter so we can use these. Now I can't use the trigger enter because these two triggers will be doing something different, so I need to create my own event, and when event is received, we can call this one green, and we can call this one red. Now we need to make sure that we are receiving what is required by the trigger enter. So just to double check, we can go down to player events, and then when trigger is entered by player, it only requires a player variable, so we have to make sure that we add that. So go player, and we'll do the same thing for our red event. And now we can finish our connection. So green trigger will go to green, red trigger will go to red. So now when the player enters the world, we are going to set their health. So what we need to do is go to values, and we need to set player persistent variable. Now if I open this, I don't have any, so I need to create one. And how to do that is you open up your build menu and you go down to this tab here, systems, player variables, create variable, and you can name it. So we're just going to name it health, hit save, and now we have a PPV for health. So now where we set change me, we can change that to health, and we can set our health to our starting health for that player. So now anytime a player enters the world, their health PPV will be set to whatever starting health is set to. Now we can add a pop-up just so that we can see what it's getting set to. So we'll go down to pop-ups, show simple pop-up for our player, and we will just display that PPV, so variable as string, and then we need to get our player persistent variable for that player. So now anytime a player enters the world, they'll get a pop-up with how much health they have. Next is to actually take that health away. Now we could in each and every one of these do it manually, but that's a lot of extra code. We don't need to do that. So what I'm going to do is go to events, create a new event, so when event is received, and I'll just call this one deal damage, and it's going to require the player and a number variable for the damage. Inside our deal damage event, we will subtract. So we're going to go back to values, and we're going to set our PPV health for the player, and we're going to set it to itself -1. So go to operators, basic operations, drop in a subtraction sign, go back to values, get our PPV for the player, and we're going to subtract it by our damage variable that is being passed. And then we can show another pop-up that just displays how much health the player has. And we can now send to this event. So events, send event to object, and we can put it in our red, and we're going to send deal damage to self with player and damage. So I'm just going to hard code a number in here. And now when we step into the red trigger, we should take 1 damage. If I get hit by the projectile, let me just make sure we pass in the proper player variable here. And then when we collide with the cube, so let's get rid of these and just make sure. So next we need to connect all our variables. So our green trigger, we need to drag our blue pill into the green trigger variable. Do the same for our red trigger, again for our projectile launcher, and for our cube. And then we have to set our starting health. We can set it to something like 5. And now if we reset it, go in, we get 5. And if I go into the trigger, now I have 4. If I collide with this, now it's just going down like crazy. So in order to prevent that and to get our launcher firing, we need to create another event. So let's just go when green is received. We can duplicate that, change the name to, let's call it launcher. We don't need the player variable, but we do need to launch something. So we're going to go to actions, scroll up, and then a little down to launch projectile. And we just have to make sure we drop in our launcher variable. And now on world start, we will send to that event. So send launcher to self. That'll fire it 1 time. We want it to fire repeatedly. So send event with delay in the underneath where we launch it. And we can just call ourselves after, let's give it some extra time because you can see it's firing pretty fast. Well, that's fine. But we still have the issue with our collision. So what we need to do is we need to create a Boolean. We're just going to call it has collided. And when colliding with player, we just got to check. So we're going to go if not. So we're going to go to operators, grab a not, and drop in has collided. So if has collided is false, we will deal damage. But we need to set, so go to values, scroll up, grab our set to. We're going to set has collided to true. So scroll down under values, value input, drop in a Boolean input, and set that to true. So now, currently, that will only fire once and never again until you reset the world. We don't want that, so we need to have a way to reset it back. So we're going to create another event. Just going to drop it right below, and we're going to call this one toggle bool, and we're just going to set has collided to false. And we can send to that, so we'll send event with delay, we'll send toggle bool to self after 1 second. So now you can only collide with this cube once every second. And just to show those two working, we'll reset it quick, and I have 5 health, now I have 4, and now if I just hold my hand on here, it'll only work once a second. However, there is an issue, because currently if I just stand in front of this, my health is just going to keep going down into the negatives. However, we want something to happen when we get to 0 or less than 0. After we set our health, we need to check. So we're going to go to control, drop our if right between set health and our pop-up, and we're going to check if our health is less than or equal to 0. We'll just grab our get user persistent variable and then drop in a number variable and type in 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to respawn the player. In order to do that, we need to go to motion, scroll down to player motion, grab respawn player, drop in our player, and we need an object variable to hold our spawn point. So object, just call it spawn point. Drop in our spawn point, so now it'll respawn player to spawn point, and we need to reset the player's health. So we're just going to scroll up to where we're setting it in the beginning, and we're going to go back down and we're just going to paste that guy in there. So now player reaches 0, he respawns, and the health gets reset to the starting health. So open up the object panel, and we need to drop in our spawn point. And close that. Now if I clear and reset the script, and if I get down to 4, 3, 1, bam, I reset, my health is back to 5. However, how do I heal myself without actually dying? So if I go over here, nothing's happening. We need to add our code for our green trigger. And what we're going to do, we're going to do the complete opposite. We're just going to take this set health, we're going to drop it into green, and we're going to set it to itself plus instead of minus. So set health, get player persistent variable health for our player, and we're going to add 1. Let's grab our pop-up just to see what's going to happen, and what you'll notice is we're going to continue to increase. So now I have 6, I have 7. So this may or may not be desirable. So in order to do that, we'll have to do yet another check. So let's find our green event. We'll throw in if. So if is greater than or equal to. So if get player persistent variable health is greater than or equal to starting health, then we will just set our health to starting health. And now, if we clear and reset, if, say, I take some damage and I heal up and I go through it again, it just stays at 5. That's my max health. It will never go over that. I can still take damage, I can still get hit by this, I can still get shot, and then I can heal. And that is pretty much it for a health system. It's pretty basic. However, we can take damage through a trigger, which could be like maybe you fall into lava, maybe you fall in the water and you can't breathe, so you're slowly taking damage. You can get shot by a gun, by a cannon, by a dragging, breathing fireballs like I have in Medieval Battlefield. Or you can get hit by an object like a sword or any other type of weaponry. And then you die, you respawn, and you just get right back into the fight or whatever game that you have scripted around this. And just to go over it again, both of our triggers are set to trigger on players. Our projectile launcher is all default. The only thing I have changed is I have this set to all players. All players except for owner is fine because we're not actually setting the owner. And then our cube is set to animated, and then under more we have it set to collision events for players, and then we have head, torso, or hands. So our event will run whether it hits our hands, our body mass, or our head. Our invisible cube here is just that. It's just holding our health manager script, nothing else, just invisible, no lights, no collidability. And then in our script we have a couple variables. We have our spawn point, we have a has collided boolean, starting health, cube, launcher, red trigger, green trigger. Most of those are for the connecting event. So when world is started, we are connecting these objects from their event to a local event. And then we're setting our launcher so that our launcher fires repeatedly. When the world is entered by the player, we're setting that player's health to starting health and then showing a pop-up with that information. Then our launcher event just launches the projectile and then calls itself after a second. Our green event is for our green trigger. So when a player enters that, we're setting our health to health plus 1. We are checking to make sure it's not over or equal to starting health. If it is, we're just going to set it to the starting health, and then we're going to show our pop-up with that information. When the player enters the red trigger, is hit by this projectile or collides with this object here, so that's this event, and this event, sends deal damage to self with player and the amount of damage. However, when colliding with a player, we are checking to see if the collision has recently happened. If so, we don't do anything. However, if it hasn't, we then set to true, send deal damage, send toggle bool to self after 1 second, which then resets it to false to allow for the collision to happen again. When deal damage is received with player and damage, we're setting health to health minus the damage variable. We are checking to make sure health is not under or equal to 0. If it is, we respawn the player, we reset the player's health, and then we show a pop-up. Just some ideas for how to incorporate some sort of healing effect in your games. You have like a fountain or a healing spring. Well, while you're in it, you get one every couple seconds. You could have like a potion that you can pick up, and then when it collides with the player's face, it then consumes the item and heals the player. Or you can have like waypoints throughout your map that the player just has to collide with to heal. So basically just things like that. You could have like a healing one that when the player gets shot with it, it heals them. Just some ideas on how to heal and take away health. And that is pretty much it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about this video, or have any suggestions for a future video, please let me know in the comment section below. If you liked the video, or if you learned anything, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're notified of all my future videos. And I try to come out with a video once a week. I usually try for Mondays, but you know, life sometimes gets in the way, and I will then try to release it the following day. I have been pretty good about it so far this year, so let's keep that going. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.